Just because it's possible to buy real estate with no money doesn't mean it's easy or comes without risk. So in this video, I'm breaking down the top 6 ways people actually do it and what you need to watch out for with each one. Number 6 is subject to financing. So subject to is when a buyer finds a homeowner that is behind on their mortgage payments or in pre-foreclosure status. The homeowner will also have little or negative equity, meaning if they sold the property like normal, they would have to bring money to closing just to pay off the loan and all the other closing costs. So the buyer offers to buy the property subject to the existing mortgage. So the buyer takes title and is now the legal owner, but the mortgage is still in the seller's name. So the buyer has to make payments on their behalf. Most of the time in the purchase agreement, they will set up some type of loan processing service to transfer the mortgage payment between all the parties involved. So subject to saves the seller from having to bring money to pay off the mortgage, and at the same time allows the buyer to take ownership of the property with no money out of pocket. Sometimes the buyer may have to pay some money out of pocket to help catch up previous mortgage payments if the seller is behind to avoid foreclosure, but this is often still less than a normal down payment. Now, as far as the risk for this strategy, there's a couple different things that can come up. The one most people bring up is the due on sale clause. Now this means that if the bank finds out that the property has changed ownership, they have the option to demand full repayment of the loan. If neither you or the seller can pay for the entire loan balance, the bank could foreclose, which obviously hurts the original seller's credit and you, the buyer, loses the property. A lot of people say that banks rarely use this clause, but just knowing they could is a risk, especially now with lots of 2 to 3% mortgage rates out there and the current rates being 6 to 7%. The bank has a stronger financial benefit to call the loan due. A couple other things to watch out for is if you miss a payment on the mortgage, the seller's credit will be negatively affected, which could cause the seller to seek legal action against you. Also, potential difficulty with the insurance because it's usually all done through the lender, and potential difficulty selling or refinancing. Since the original loan is in the seller's name, it may be harder to find a lender to agree to a refinance, or if you go to sell the property, the new buyer or the buyer's lender may refuse to close until the current loan is paid off since it's not in your name. All right, the 5th way is partnerships. This is the simplest way to buy a real estate investment with none of your own money. Partnerships could work 100 different ways, but probably the most common is one partner does the work and the other partner brings the money. Then they split ownership 50-50. So if you want to buy real estate with no money, that puts you in the work partner category. This includes finding the right deal, lining up financing, negotiating, managing contractors, and either managing the sale if it's a flip or asset managing if it's a rental. So you can adjust based on the partnership. Maybe you only have expertise in a few of those things, so your percentage of ownership is smaller. Or maybe you do all of the work and you put up a small percentage of the down payment too. Then you might take on a larger percentage of ownership. A couple things to keep in mind with real estate investing partnerships is, especially with rentals, a lot of the work and decisions are made after the initial purchase. You could potentially have disagreements on the decisions to refinance or sell, or the money partner could feel like they're getting sucked into doing the work because the other partner that's supposed to be doing the work doesn't have any of their own money involved. These things can easily lead to lower investment returns, damaged relationships, and even lawsuits. The 4th way to buy real estate with no money is wholesaling. I'm putting quotations because with wholesaling real estate, you don't actually take ownership, so it's not buying. But it is a very common way people make active income in the industry. So wholesaling is when you find a property from a motivated seller and put it under contract at a discounted price. Then connect that contract to the end buyer, which is usually an investor. And the difference between what the investor will pay and what you have it under contract for is your profit. So for example, let's say a distressed property is worth $200,000 all fixed up. You, the wholesaler, and the seller agree to sell for $100,000. Then you find an end buyer that will pay $120,000 because it's still a good deal for them. At closing, the seller gets paid the $100,000 from the end buyer, and also the end buyer pays you $20,000 for bringing them the deal. If you have absolutely nothing to start with and don't care about owning real estate, you just want to make money with it, this is probably the best way because it's very little risk and you obviously don't have any closing costs or anything. Of course, with these other methods, you can get the seller to pay your closing costs, but it doesn't always work out that way. So a wholesaler's goal is to build up a large list of investors, so when they get a property under contract, they can send it out to all of them through email to try to get the highest price. You might think a big risk to this would be if you can't find anyone to pay a higher price than your contract, or if your end buyer backs out, then you're stuck with a property that you can't buy. But most wholesalers put ways in the contract to back out if any of this happens. I would say the main risk to this is the increasing amount of regulations for wholesalers. For example, some states like where I am in Virginia require you to have a real estate license to wholesale. And also there are a ton of laws against marketing a property you don't own or are not the official listing agent of, just to name a few. The third best way to buy real estate with no money is seller financing. Seller financing usually happens when someone has no mortgage on their property, and when they go to sell it, they act as the lender for the buyer. So this gives the buyer a ton of flexibility because now they can not only negotiate the price, but also the interest rate, down payment, and loan terms. This usually creates a sliding scale for these different options. For example, if you want a low interest rate, the seller probably wants top dollar for the purchase price. So if you want to put nothing down at all, the seller probably wants above market interest rates, a balloon payment, and top dollar price. So you can see where I'm going with the risk. If you pay top dollar and put nothing down, you start day one with negative equity. If something happens and you can't pay, the original seller is going to foreclose on you just like a bank would. Also with the balloon payment, if you don't stretch that out far enough, it may come due before the property's value has increased to more than your purchase price. This means if you want to sell or refinance to avoid paying the entire loan balance, you will need to bring money to closing. Now there are ways you can try to negotiate the price and terms lower without putting any money up front. Like you could say, I'll put $30,000 as the down payment, but I'll pay $5,000 every 6 months for the first 3 years on top of the regular mortgage payments. I really think seller financing is great for both parties, but unless the seller knows you personally, they're going to want an upfront down payment 99.9% of the time. Number 2 is using USDA or VA loans. If you're buying a single family home as a primary or looking to house hack a 2 to 4 unit property, this is the best way to get in with no money down. Now to qualify for a VA loan, you have to be a veteran, and for the USDA loan, the property has to be in a designated rural development zone. Here's an example of USDA eligible areas for where I am in Central Virginia. So USDA and VA loans in most cases are slightly stricter than a standard conventional loan in terms of the condition that the property needs to be in, and both are known for having low appraisals. But the positives are they don't require anything down. As for the risks, you run into the same issues as seller financing 100%. Because every listing agent knows the lenders for these loans are strict and often go with other loan types if the offers are similar. This puts you in the situation to most likely have to offer more than market value to get an offer accepted. So again, you're starting day one with negative equity. And the reason this is a tough spot is because even if you can sell it for what you bought it for, you're going to need to bring 8 to 10% of the price to closing to cover all the transaction fees. If you don't have that, and the reason you need to sell is because you can't make your payments, the bank will foreclose on your property. Another thing is the less you put down, the more your monthly payment is. So the harder it's going to be to qualify and the better your debt to income ratio needs to be. But at the end of the day, these loans are ranked higher because they're much more accessible and more realistic to obtain than 0% down seller financing. Now the best way to buy real estate with no money is private or hard money loans. These two types of loans are similar but slightly different. A private money loan is usually just an individual, like friends, family, or a local investor, that lends you short-term financing. This is used like if you're flipping or burning a property, the private money lender could lend you 100% of the purchase price and rehab, with interest-only payments of 10% and make it due in full in no more than 12 months. Another way would be if you're buying a property and using a standard loan, you could use the private money lender to cover the down payment and pay it back in 12 months or whatever you agree to. Hard money loans are more formal and usually from a company with their own short-term lending guidelines. In almost all cases, you have to either show or build up enough experience investing in real estate for the lender to lend you 100% of the purchase price and rehab amount. But a way to pull this off without showing or having experience is doing the BRRRR method. This is when you buy a property, rehab it to increase its value, and the value goes up so much that when you refinance out of the hard money loan, the new loan covers all your previous expenses, leaving no money left in the deal. Quick example would be you buy a property for $100,000, put $50,000 in rehab and other costs, so all in for $150,000. It then appraises for $200,000, so you get a new long-term loan for 75% of the property's value. That gives you a new $150,000 loan covering your cost from the initial purchase and rehab, which leaves you with none of your own money left in the property after the refinance. Now, most of the time you would rent it out as a rental property. That's what one of the R's stand for. But if you refinance into an owner-occupied loan, you can move in after refinancing if you wanted to, and probably get a nice sized check from the cash out refinance if you used a loan that allowed for greater than 80% loan to value. So you would now be getting paid for buying and moving into the house. This method does require you to have some money up front for the purchase and before the refinance, but if you needed to, you could use private money to cover whatever the hard money doesn't. Most hard money lenders require new investors or buyers to put 20% of the purchase price down and 20% of the rehab amount down. The risks to private and hard money are, if everything doesn't go as planned, you're still on the hook for the original loan. If that appraisal comes in low, the rehab budget goes over, or you can't sell for what you expected, you need another way to come up with what the refinance or sale doesn't cover. Another risk is if you plan on renting after a BRRRR, especially now with somewhat higher interest rates, is most of the time the property won't cash flow if you pull out all of your money, potentially leading to problems making the mortgage payment. Now that's not an issue if you plan on moving in, or you can float the negative cash flow and all you care about is just not leaving any money in up front. I wouldn't recommend the negative cash flow approach because real estate can be a risky investment even when you're not using 100% financing. That's why I made a 3-part series going over how to reduce the risk of real estate investing that you can watch here. And if you need help buying, selling, or investing in real estate, all my information is in the description for you to contact me.